Our world musician today is Ara Tapuzian from Farmington Hills, Michigan, who is an Armenian-American Kanun artist. Ara, thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you for having me.
Ara, when I do an internet search for Kanun, the Middle Eastern harp, yours is one of the very first names that pop up in the search results. And you being a nationally recognized artist, it's really an honor for us to have you here today.
Oh, thank you.
Now, can you tell us a little bit more about the Kanun here, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to. The Kanun dates back to the 5th century. It's played throughout the Middle East. Armenians play it, Arabs, Turks, Greeks, Jews, Persian, throughout portions of Europe and the Middle East. And the instrument itself, it's a trapezoid shape. It has a sound box on the inside. There's a number of different chambers. You can't see it, but there's different dividers on the inside of the instrument that helps channel the sound through. There are 76 strings on this instrument, a lot to tune, and they rest on a bridge, and there's probably about 10 to 15,000 pounds of pressure right on this bridge. The bridge itself rests on these 4 channels, these 4 chambers, consisting of sometimes it could be, an older instrument would be an animal skin, a calf skin. Now we get into either fish skin or synthetic material. The strings all rest on what these are called mandals, and they're levers. And basically, this is the mechanics of the instrument itself. So depending on the note, as you can see on some of the smaller range between the bridge and the pegboard, there's not as many of these. So there's 4 here, but down here there's 10 or 15. So this gives me the notes. This helps me with the notes. So with this instrument, you can play both Western and Eastern music. This particular instrument, it was made in Turkey about 20 years ago. Okay. And so the mandal system on here is geared toward Armenian and Turkish music. You can still play Arabic music, and you can play Western music, classical music.
Now, do you have to tune them differently when you play either Western or Eastern music?
No, the tuning is the same, but the strings are tuned 3 in unison.
Okay.
Which, it can get a little bit temperamental depending on the weather.
Right.
But no, it's tuned the same way. Again, though, it just depends. This is the granddaddy of the piano. So a lot of instruments really fall in this family. We were talking about the santur early, the dulcimer, the auto harp, and the kanun. These are all precursors to the piano, the modern day piano that we see today. And that's, it sounds simple enough, but it's interesting to tune.
So now this can be considered both as a classical and a folk instrument?
It's predominantly a folk instrument because of the music that we do. Mm-hmm. But certainly, when we say classical, I guess the distinction would be, Western classical of, Mozart and Beethoven and so forth, versus what we call classical music for Middle Eastern music. Okay. So, going back a couple of centuries, for example, in the Ottoman Empire, a lot of classical Turkish music was composed. Interestingly enough, a lot of them were by Armenians. So you've got a lot of the music that's still being played today that were composed by Armenians. People like Tatios Efendi. These are all Armenians that created a lot of the music, for the court, within the Ottoman Empire. So when I refer to classical music, I'm referring to the Middle Eastern, the Armenian Middle Eastern form of that music.
Okay. So now, how do you read the music? How are the notations written? Is it in Western notations that you write, or is it a different notation for Armenian music?
It's different. If you took a a classically trained violinist from the Detroit Symphony, and if they saw Middle Eastern sheet music, they'd probably get an immediate headache. What's different on it is really the notations of it, of the bending of the notes. So there is certainly, you have your G minors, your A majors, and so forth, but within that, they are the notes itself are bent. It's how I like to describe it. So for what I do and the music that I play, we don't call them scales necessarily. They're called modes.
Okay.
And the modes that we use is in a system called the makam, M-A-K-A-M or M-A-Q-A-M.
Okay.
And that's used throughout the Middle East, Arabic cultures, and Armenian music as well. So the Armenian folk music and the dance music that I would play is based on that makam system.
Okay.
So, for example, something may be called nihavent, which is just the name of the mode, and that consists of a certain scale. Within that scale could be 2 or 3 other scales.
Wow.
And so it's quite complex.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you're familiar with Indian music, right?
A
little
bit,
bit.
yep.
So we were talking about the rag, and
Yeah,
you said the
very
mode.
similar.
So
Similar in the sense
Okay.
that, it's a mode. And so you're not using a traditional Western scale to play Indian folk music.
okay, I got it. But in the mode, you would have a certain set of notes, right?
Correct.
And then it's okay to add in other notes as well.
Well, there's a certain way to play what we call a taksim, and a taksim is another Middle Eastern term that just means solo, and so for the music again, it represents the artistry of the actual musician. So depending on their abilities on how they could play a taksim, it shows that audience the versatility of that musician. So within a solo or a taksim, one would play the scale, a certain way, meaning there is a progression within the note structure. But within that particular mode, you can deviate to go to different modes within that. It's sort of, if you want to look at it like a family tree. So you've got the main one that, depending on what note you hit, it allows you to go to a different makam.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's almost like changing the keys?
Yeah.
It is, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you demonstrate a little bit
Sure.
about?
So this is within a mode. I've got it set up to play within the mode nihavent,
Okay.
or the Arabs call nahawan. That's the interesting part. Is the names are very similar. There's some slight alterations to how
Okay.
they're spelled and whatnot. But this gives you an idea of just really of a solo within this scale, if you will.
Beautiful.
Thank you very much. It's
Now you just
beautiful
played
instrument.
ad lib, right?
It's an
not a-
improvisation,
okay.
and again, it's a taksim, and again, it's all improvised. There's a big similarity between Middle Eastern and world music, as you know, to jazz.
Okay.
And so jazz has got a lot of improvisational music, so does what we do. It's encouraged. it's the basis of a lot of music that's portrayed. You know, in Armenian dance music or wedding music, it occurs often. A lot of improvisation, and I think we get that from the classical Middle Eastern music, where before the actual piece, the lead musician, whether it's a Kanun player or other, would do this taksim at the beginning, kind of sets the tone for not only the mode, but the actual piece of the song.
That's wonderful. It's also very similar to North Indian classical music, where there's a lot of improvisation.
I think world music's got a nice thread going through all of it. I think that you can touch a lot of different cultures when you're doing world music. So there's a lot of similarities. That's
wonderful. Now, how long have you been playing this instrument?
I've been playing this instrument now probably about 25 years, which is not as long when you consider musicians that say, well, I've been playing this since I was 4 or 5 years old. I've been playing music in general since I was a child, but I really didn't get into actually playing the music, the Middle Eastern music, until probably around college.
Now, what instrument were you playing before this?
I was playing in public school. I was playing trumpet.
Trumpet. Oh, that's a far cry from.
It's a far cry from it. As a matter of fact, the violin and the clarinet are very prominent in the music that I play, and those were the two instruments that I wanted to play as a kid. My parents kind of pushed me in the direction of trumpet, I think because of the difficulty and quite honestly, just really the sign of the times. All the boys were playing the trumpets. All the girls were playing the violins.
Okay.
And sometimes I kicked myself that I wish I was playing the violin. It's a very prominent instrument, in my culture and in Middle Eastern music, and I could have been playing all these years. But I started to play trumpet. I always liked classical, Western classical music that we talked of, and Armenian music growing up. And but it really wasn't until college that I actually said, I wanted to play this music.
But you were hearing this even when you were a little boy?
Yeah, there were a lot of different Armenian cultural weekends.
Okay.
I would hear this music at weddings. I would see different dances, different festivals and cultural events. And I heard a friend of mine who makes Middle Eastern instruments say something very recently which made a lot of sense, that when we were all kids, we'd watch on stage and we'd actually see all of these live musicians playing this music, and really you could see the enjoyment, you could see the connection between everybody on stage. And I think it was that in itself that said, I wanted to be able to do that. So as a child, I heard the music, I saw the music quite a bit. It was probably when I was around 7 or 8 years old. I tell the story that I went to Atlantic City to hear, to be part of an Armenian cultural sort of a weekend. And there was an Armenian band that would be playing, during the day in the lobby. And again, I was a child, but I knew the person that was sort of organizing it. And she let me sit in the corner and bang on a tambourine.
Oh.
So I like to tell people that was the first time I got to play Armenian music. But really, it's just over the years. I would go to Armenian dances and actually tape record a lot of these musicians play because I loved the music so much. And it wasn't readily available. It was, we listened to 78 RPM records, or we listened to vinyl LPs. And that was very limiting. You're talking 3-minute songs, and yet here I would go to a dance and watch a song that would last maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And so I would tape record that. So I would learn, really, because I enjoyed it so much, and I would listen to a lot of the solos that the musicians would do. And that's how I just became fascinated. And again, it wasn't until I got older that I had the opportunity to actually play the music.
Now, did you take formal training from someone, or
I didn't. That's the one thing that a lot of us learned by ear.
That's amazing.
We learned to watch. There's no, for what I do, there really isn't sheet music. So a lot of these recordings that I would tape record was for the purpose of learning the songs. And I had a musician once tell me, if you can hum it, good chance, or if you can whistle it, there's a good chance you'd be able to play the song. I had different musicians over the years, show me little things here and there. I had an Armenian musician that anytime I would see him, which was only once a year, and he would play a big dance out on the East Coast, he would literally want me sitting next to him off stage to watch what he was doing. And so here's a musician that literally took the time. He'd show up in the hotel lobby and see me. He'd say, "Come here, I'm going to go put all my stuff away, be ready for your lesson." And I was there just to party. I wasn't there to take any lessons. But I did that year after year. And, those 2 or 3 hours were valuable. But no formal training.
Now, you have your own recording company as well, right?
I do.
You produce a lot of Armenian music?
I do. I created a company called American Recording Productions back in 1991 for the purpose of, it really fell into it by accident. I was playing music. People come up to me and said, "Do you have any recordings?" No, I really don't. Started to make some recordings, started to sell them, and thought, this might be an interesting. There were very few of us that were doing, Armenian Middle Eastern music. So it's really when I created the record label, and I've recorded and produced probably over 30 different albums, and I spent a lot more time on it maybe back in the early 90s, and so I was fortunate to get global distribution, so I don't have to do too much with it. I still sell it. People can go to arpmusic.com and they can sample the music and
So you have your own studio here?
I don't have a studio. I always the recording label is a mail order